The Banyarwanda are the cultural and linguistic group of people who inhabit mainly Rwanda. Within the Banyarwanda there are three subgroups: Hutu, Tutsi and Batwa. Some Banyarwanda live in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, having migrated there from neighboring Rwanda in waves. In the Congo, they live in the provinces of North Kivu and South Kivu. There are also 1 million Banyarwanda in Uganda, where they live in the west of the country. Umutara and Kitara are the centers of their pastoral and agricultural areas. The Banyarwanda, through their language of Kinyarwanda, form a subgroup of the Bantu peoples, who inhabit a geographical area stretching east and southward from Central Africa across the African Great Lakes region down to southern Africa. Scholars from the Royal Museum of Central Africa in Tervuren, building on earlier work by Malcolm Guthrie, placed Kinyarwanda within the Great Lakes Bantu languages. This classification groups the Banyarwanda with 19 other ethnic groups including the Barundi, Banyankore, Baganda and Bahunde. The Banyarwanda are descended from a diverse group of people, who settled in the area through a series of migrations. The earliest known inhabitants of the African Great Lakes area were a sparse group of hunter-gatherers, who lived in the late Stone Age. They were followed by a larger population of early Iron Age settlers, who produced dimpled pottery and iron tools. These early inhabitants were the ancestors of the TWA, a group of Aboriginal pygmy hunter-gatherers who remain in the area today. Between 700 BC and 1500 AD, a number of Bantu groups migrated into the territory and began to clear forest land for agriculture. The forest-dwelling TWA lost much of their habitat and moved to the slopes of mountains. Historians have several theories regarding the nature of the Bantu migrations. One theory is that the first settlers were Hutu, while the Tutsi migrated later and formed a distinct racial group, possibly of Cushitic origin. An alternative theory is that the migration was slow and steady, with incoming groups integrating into rather than conquering the existing society. Under this theory, the Hutu and Tutsi distinction arose later and was a class distinction rather than a racial one. The earliest form of social organization in the area was the clan. The clans were not limited to genealogical lineages or geographical area, and most included Hutu, Tutsi, and TWA. From the 14th or 15th centuries, the clans began to coalesce into kingdoms, of which the Kingdom of Rwanda was one. The first Banyarwanda were the people of this kingdom. According to oral history, Rwanda was founded on the shores of Lake Muhazi in the Buganza area, close to the modern city of Rwamagana. At that time it was a small state in a loose confederation with the larger and more powerful neighboring kingdoms, Bugesera and Gisaka. The kingdom was invaded by the Banyoro around 1600, and the kings forced to flee westward. But the kingdom survived and a new dynasty, the Nyagania, was built by Reganzu Endri, which started expanding from its base in Nyanza. As the kingdom expanded, the people in conquered areas became part of the Banyarwanda identity. The kingdom reached its greatest extent during the 19th century under the reign of King Kigali Rwabugiri. Rwabugiri initiated several administrative reforms in Banyarwanda culture. These included Ubuhake, in which Tutsi patrons ceded cattle, and therefore privileged status, to Hutu or Tutsi clients in exchange for economic and personal service, and Uburetwa, a corvée system in which Hutu were forced to work for Tutsi chiefs. Rwabugiri's changes caused a rift to grow between the Hutu and Tutsi populations. The TWA were better off than in pre-kingdom days, with some becoming dancers in the royal court, but their numbers continued to decline. The first exodus of ethnic Banyarwanda from the jurisdiction of the Rwanda kingdom was the Banyamulenge, who crossed the Ruzizi River into the South Kivu province of the Belgian Congo. Rwandan historian Alexis Kagame wrote in 1972 that soldiers under King Kigali II settled in the Congo in the 1700s. Although Gerard Prunia cast some doubt on this hypothesis, stating that Kagame had a tendency to exaggerate the power of the old Rwanda kingdom. International historians believe the first significant influx of Banyarwanda into South Kivu occurred in the 1880s. Although some Congolese intellectuals contest this, Scholars cite two major reasons for the migration. The first is that the migrants were composed of Tutsi trying to avoid the increasingly high taxes imposed by Rwabugiri, while the second is that the group was fleeing the violent war of succession that erupted after the death of Rwabugiri in 1895. This group was mostly Tutsi and their Hutu or Bagragu could not support large-scale agriculture, but allowed cattle grazing. Over time, the Banyamulenge identified less as Banyarwanda and more as Congolese. Havi